And welcome to the Worst EU Lobbying Awards 2007. Out of the 20,000 lobbyists in Brussels, we have selected 5 candidates who have done their utmost best to influence EU officials in cleverly nasty ways. Now we need you to vote for the most misleading or malicious lobbyer of them all. So here are the candidates. BMW, Daimler und Porsche for their amazing work on delaying the EU targets for CO2 emissions from cars. 2. PR firm Cabinet Stewart for brilliantly running the think tank ICCF. In fact, a cover-up of Kyoto-hating US multinationals. Oh my God! 3. Etienne Davignon for cleverly advising the EU about Africa while sitting on the board of Suez, a French multinational looking to expand into Africa. 4. The lobbyist trade union APACA for its very visible counter-campaign against transparency and openness. Shh. 5. Spanish multinational Repsol for fantastically working the EU research agenda on agrofuels for its commercial needs. And those are all the candidates. Vote now on www.worstlobby.eu.
testing, testing. So what's the problem? You say they can't hear me. Why can't they not hear me? It's on. It says audio. See? Can they hear me now? It looks like they can hear me now, huh? Okay, thank you for checking. That's interesting how this works. You're able to check with your smartphones, and I want to be high tech too, like you and me. I want to be high tech. I want to use all of this technology. I want to move forward into the 21st century. So I want to master it, and I want to use its full capacity, and I want you to help me. And I think maybe I want to believe that you learn more if you are helping me and helping each other learn through these kinds of activities. So thank you very much for checking your cell phones, for communicating with the other students. I don't know why it wasn't recording, maybe because I had a knob turned down. Thank you very much. Maybe it means I need to use this microphone. I need to use the microphone to make sure they record. So, okay, well, we're learning, and let me go back to. Thank you very much, reminding me about the attendance. I have to also explain I'm a little tired. You know why I'm tired? Because there's a conference going on in the United States that I usually attend, and every November there's a big conference going on in the U.S. and I usually attend that conference. And it's the Association for Slavic, East European, and Eurasian Studies Association is this Cyber Campus? Yeah. And I think it's this. It's always in the U.S. And of course, I cannot go to the U.S. So the panels are, the conference is online. And it's everything is set for, where's attendance? Here? 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 Chol Sok. And so then we go to add, yeah? Smart attendance here? This one. Smart-to Chul Sok. Smart-to Chul Sok. Simple enough. And the magic number is 632. 632. So this conference is now online, and it started at 2 o'clock in the morning this morning. So I had to get up at midnight, and I've been up since midnight. And conference panel finished at 6:30, 7:30. Sorry, and then teaching some a little bit. But that's just the way it is. So I have to. Rely upon you to help me a little bit more. And this conference will continue. I think I'm going to have to keep doing that all weekend in order to attend the other events. So I have to make sure, so we go screen share, and let's see if I can find those notes. So, now I want to introduce introduction to democracy in policymaking. Policymaking and democracy. And you already got or received a strong sense of how there's much suspicion about lobbying in the European Union and the formation of interest groups, including groups that represent the interests of farmers and agriculture, like we covered on Monday, or the formation of lobby groups that represent the interests of oil companies, criticized in the Angry Mermaid video I showed you on Monday, or criticized also in the video I just showed you about these corporations lobbying individually or together in their nonprofit associations, associations of oil companies, associations of electronics companies. They're not making money themselves because they're just political organizations, but they represent big for-profit companies. And so how can we understand that skepticism, that hostility? I should tell you that the dominant view about the role of interest groups in policymaking is the dominant view regarding how
to understand democratic countries make policy. That this is the group approach to understanding how the European Union or the United States or the South Korean government or the French government or the Belgian government make policy. Policy on any topic, whether it be agriculture, technology, environment, the formation of groups, the formation of interest groups, and they pressure and lobby the politicians, many of whom are always focused on what? What is a politician almost always thinking about? That's public, not private, public. Keeping their job, keeping their job. And a politician, to keep his or her job, has to what? Get reelected. Get elected and get reelected. And that means winning political campaigns, winning elections, which means having political campaigns to persuade you and me to vote for them. And that means money, because political campaigns are expensive. You have to buy, of course, television advertising time to advertise your political campaign, but now you have to spend more and more money on internet and social media. Joe Biden in the United States spent hundreds of millions of dollars advertising on Facebook and Twitter, on email. I'm getting, all the time was getting emails and social media requests from Joe Biden's campaign to work for him, vote for him, give my own money, right? They spend money to raise more money. They need money to pay for campaign ads, to ask for more money from you and me. And so, and this reflects the relationship of public opinion, public officials to groups, that they need each other. The group needs politicians and decision makers to listen to them, and the politicians and decision makers listen to them for many reasons, including just the good idea and the wisdom for the well-being of the world, let us say, regarding climate change, but they also listen to those groups because those groups have campaign and political resources, money, voters, supporters who will vote for the politician, so the politician will win election and keep winning elections. And as I said, it costs lots and lots of money. And most politicians, not all, but most politicians know what they need to do in order to keep their jobs. If they get elected, if they get to position through winning an election, most of them know what fairly well, fairly predictably, what they must do to win the next election. In other words, they know who they should make happy, who they should make sure they support, whom they should talk to among the business leaders and other interest groups in society. And this is the dominant approach for understanding public policy making. And like we covered at the last class about veggie burgers, you had lots of different interest groups trying to influence, trying to shape the European Parliament and the European Council of Ministers, the Council of Ministers of the European Union, and all of the other organizations that make up the European Union to get what they want, to get the European Union to ban the use of term veggie burger for a sandwich that has no meat. For example, from the point of view of the agriculture lobby. And then there are other interest groups in the environmental sector, environmental area, that are, of course, are pushing to allow the product producers to continue to use the term veggie burger for sandwiches that look like burgers but have no meat, but have a vegetable substitute in them. Why do those environmental groups like those? Because they want you to buy those veggie burgers, and do not buy meat burgers. Meat bad, meat bulgogi bad. Vegetables good, because one of the main sources of greenhouse gas emissions, carbon dioxide and other emissions that trap the sunlight and trap the heat is from meat production, from raising pigs and cows in particular, but also chicken, that generates tremendous amount of greenhouse gas emissions. And that needs to be controlled if we're going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions drastically. It's not just cars and trucks and airplanes. It is also very much the agriculture industry. And so these environmental groups are also interest groups. And they're all pressuring and pushing politicians to adopt the position they each want. And the decision depends upon what the politician believes is most useful for keeping his job or keeping her job, getting reelected. And so the main idea behind public policy, the group approach, is that you can understand what the European Union or the United States or South Korea or France or Belgium does in terms of government policy making by comparing and weighting the different political power and influence of these different groups as they each pressure the politicians to vote and act in particular ways. So it sounds very much, did any of you take physics classes? You know physics? You know, like force equals mass times acceleration and the law of gravity. Did you study that in school, in physics class? Right? This group approach sounds a lot like physics. It's a lot like physics in that if I want to understand the big outcome of veggie burgers, right? The outcome of veggie burgers. How did the European Union or the European Parliament, as part of the European Union, or the Council of Ministers, how did they adopt their policy? Well, on veggie burgers, or what they prefer to be policy, because I think still the Council of Ministers of the European Union has to vote on the big veggie burger issue. And so that report I showed you on Monday was in the middle of the ordinary legislative procedure in which the European Union is not finished yet, apparently, because that was the European Parliament vote. The Council of Ministers apparently has not voted. It's not done, is what I'm saying. And we'll see what happens. But currently, remember, if the Council of Ministers and the European Parliament cannot agree, then the policy is not adopted. Currently, in the European Union, you can call a sandwich that looks like a burger with no meat a veggie burger. That's current policy. If you want to change that, to say, no, you cannot call veggie burgers sandwiches that have no meat, because a burger has meat. You cannot use the word veggie burger, the term veggie burger. You're changing policy. So this change of policy has to be approved by the European Parliament and the Council of Ministers. And the European Parliament already said no. So it's done. They will continue to use the term veggie burger for sandwiches that look like burgers, taste like burgers, but have no meat. Have you tried veggie burger? I haven't tried them. I think doesn't McDonald's have veggie burgers? Or Burger King? I thought they do, right? I read they taste pretty good. They taste pretty good. And they have no meat in them. This looks like meat. But to understand how the European Parliament decided this issue, you look at the different interest groups. You look at the agricultural lobby group. It's big and powerful. And it feels very strongly that there should be no meat in veggie burgers. And this is vegetables, no vegetables. And something like this, I don't want to go too much into this, right? So this is the agricultural lobby interest group, and they feel very strongly that it should be no meat and it should contain no vegetables, right? But then they have these other groups, the animal welfare groups. They don't want meat, you to eat meat. They want you to protect cows and chickens and pigs because it's cruel to raise animals, to slaughter them, to eat them. You have the environmental lobby, also pushing to stop greenhouse gas emissions. You have the stores, like McDonald's and Burger King, that already spend lots of money selling veggie burgers, and they're another interest group pushing this way. And you sum up all of these vectors. Like I said, if you took physics class, you had to sum the vectors to understand how you average all of these different forces moving in different directions to come up with one vector, one arrow. And you sum them all up, and you get something like this. Basically, the European Union doesn't change its policy. Right? It doesn't change its policy. That's the final vector. Or it changes it just a little bit. When you sum up all of these different arrows, you get a very small arrow moving in this direction. You understand? You're balancing all of these conflicting political forces. These vectors are forces, like in physics. We call them vector in English, right? And that's the dominant approach for understanding from liberal democracy how liberal democratic governments make policy. All of you have the right to lobby. All of you join many different lobbies. If you're a farmer, you are also a mother who wants to raise your children eating healthy food. You're also environmentally conscious. You're also concerned about the well-being of animals. So you have lots of different interest groups you belong to, officially or unofficially, or sympathetically or not so sympathetically. And all of these different groups represent your different identities. Some people feel more strongly about animal rights than they feel about whether or not you eat meat. They want to protect the animals. Whatever. There is an interest group for that very strong position. Just like there's a very strong position for climate change, and a very strong position for the right of farmers to continue to make a living selling animals for us to eat, like we've been eating for millions of years. Now all of a sudden it's bad. Oh, it's bad. You like robot. Oh. Even though we've been eating meat for thousands and thousands of generations of humans, right? And so you have different views and different positions, and you join different groups if you feel very strongly about those issues. You really want to protect animals and stop factory farms from raising pigs in terrible conditions so that we can then eat them. And you form interest groups, and you combine your efforts, your individual efforts with her efforts, with his efforts, and you come together and you have more influence in a democracy by cooperating and collaborating to form groups. If you don't form groups, the only impact you're likely to have is your vote. And there are millions and millions of people who vote. And people do vote. I vote, you vote, and we should vote. But if we really want to have a stronger impact on government, in policy, we form groups, and we join those groups. And we pay attention to the leaders of those groups who we pay to pay close attention to that issue for us, because you're a student, you're many things, and you don't have the time and energy to spend all of your day researching the well-being of animal rights and animal well-being. So you join People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA, P-E-T-A, and you give them some money every year, 50,000 won a year, and you pay people at the top of that organization, at the top of PETA, to do all that work for you. To pay close attention to animal welfare issues, animal welfare regulations and policies, what is coming before the European Parliament, who is pushing this position, who should we talk to? You pay professionals to do that.
And you pay through your monthly or annual money you pay to the organization. And there are thousands and thousands of those kinds of interest groups. Thousands and thousands on any issue you can imagine. And that is how democracy works in practice. Yeah, voting is important. Even giving individual money to politicians is important because, as I told you, Joe Biden and others are always asking me to give them money, or the organizations working for Joe Biden are asking me to give them money. But if you really are motivated about an issue, you have more impact if you join and cooperate and work with an interest group. And that's good. And not to make fun of interest groups for big companies. Remember, you want to get a job, right? When you graduate from CUK, you want to get a job. And you know what? You're going to apply to Samsung, you're going to apply to LG, you're going to apply to these big corporations because they have lots of money and they have lots of jobs. And you might get a job there, like millions of other Koreans. And so your interest will be in the well-being of your employer, of who gives you your first job, your first step in your career. So 80% of your life, of my life, is economic related. 80% of my social interaction, 80% of my existence in society is tied up with economics, including my career. And so most people work in the private sector. They work for companies that make money. They do not work for the Catholic University of Korea nonprofit organization or the Catholic Forum that runs this university. They do not work for the Korean government. They work for private, for-profit organizations, businesses. So it's okay for them to lobby because most of us have our life, hopes, dreams, needs satisfied through working in business. So don't be ashamed of lobbyists. But for some reason, Americans are suspicious about big, powerful, rich companies pressuring Washington government or the European Union governments, Parliament, Council of Ministers to work for the interests of those companies. And but you know why they do, of course. These are three different approaches to understand. These are three different ideal images about how a government makes policy, right? The group approach, the interest group approach. Keep it to one word so it's easy to remember. Remember, this is the dominant political science view for understanding why a government acts the way it does in policy, domestic or foreign. But then there are the other approaches that's implied in the Angry Mermaid video, or the worst lobbying award. That there is an elite group of people who, because they're so rich and so powerful, that they are able to use their power to control and dominate the government behind the scenes, so that oh yeah, we have elections. Yes, we have different ways for you and I to communicate, to try to pressure the government, but there are these really powerful interests that are so powerful, mostly from your money, that are so powerful and so oriented to themselves that they form a global organization that is behind every government, pulling the strings. Look, Moon Jae-in. Remember, you know those puppets, what do you call them in Korean? Those kind of puppets that dance around while the puppeteer pulls the strings? We call those marionettes, right? Marionette puppets. The Moon Jae-in, or even Donald Trump, or Emmanuel Macron in France, they're like puppets.
and they dance in front of you, and we look at them. We focus our attention on that beautiful, funny-looking puppet, and that puppet makes bold statements to capture our attention, but we don't pay attention to the hand and the hidden person and the hidden powers behind the scenes who are pulling the strings of the puppet. That's the elite approach, right? The elite approach says, this is propaganda. You want to understand how the U.S. government or the European Union government acts in public policy issues? Don't pay attention to interest groups and politicians. We have to look behind them. We have to look at hidden, purposely hidden, secretive, powerful groups that are often described as like bankers, rich, powerful families behind the scenes. And sometimes this elite approach goes crazy. We talk about it's the worldwide Jewish conspiracy. No. It's not the Jews. It's the worldwide Jewish Freemason conspiracy. These people go off on conspiracy theories, right? And like some of you I talked about in foreign policy, U.S. foreign policy class. QAnon conspiracy theory that there is a secret group of democratically affiliated politicians and powerful people, including George Soros, the Jewish Hungarian billionaire, who are secretly running and guiding the world through their control over universities, over the media, over powerful business people who want to create a world government under their control, using lies and propaganda, convincing you that we should give up France's sovereignty or America's sovereignty to the European Union or the United Nations in order to address global climate change, because we have to coordinate and cooperate in order to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. The U.S. government must submit to the United Nations, and the French people must submit to the European Union and obey them, so that we create a world that is dominated by this global elite who don't care so much about France or the United Kingdom or Germany. They care about making as much money as they can by integrating the world as much as possible and basically erasing nations. You think this sounds silly? It's not. This is Brexit. This is Brexit. This is Nigel Farage talking to you right now. Right? That this is all an effort by some global elite. European integration is an effort by a European and a global elite who want to control the world and think they can by making you be sacrificed in terms of your French identity, your German identity, to create a greater global community in which you will serve the interests of the powerful and have to integrate with other people you might not like Japanese or Muslims or Africans, people that are not like you and me. And I don't want to be like them. I don't want free movement of people from poor countries to rich countries, because that makes money for George Soros and the rich industrialists, because they pay less money in wages because they can get cheap labor to come to France and take the jobs of French people by Polish people who will work for 50% less money than French people through having a single market with free movement of goods, services, capital, and labor. And this was one of the powerful appeals to the French voters to say, "Adieu!" to the 2004 European Union Constitutional Treaty. The French, the Polish plumbers, you know what a plumber is, right? Somebody who works with water and pipes. Polish plumbers will come to France, and they'll take all the jobs from the French plumbers, because Polish plumbers will work for half the rate per hour in payment that French plumbers demand and expect as citizens of France and the rights of Frenchmen. I'm not making
up. Holy scrubbers! And that's the world that this elite wants. So they can make more money and have more power, and eventually take over the whole world. And this is what Donald Trump appeals to. This is what Nigel Farage appeals to. And if you're Boris Johnson, you want to win elections? As I told you in the last class, the Conservative Party are politicians. They want to keep their jobs. They want to win elections. And they cannot simply ignore, in their view, this populist nationalist hostility that sees the European Union or the whole world as dominated by this elite power group. And all of that stuff that I was telling you about interest groups, and that's all propaganda to brainwash you, to fool you, to make you passive and accept the outcomes that cause you to have, or many Americans, many Frenchmen, many Italians, to have less and less money because there's more and more foreigners coming to do the work in Italy and will work for much less money than I as an Italian, demand and expect as a citizen of Italy. And then the other ideal extreme picture of how policy is made is the class approach, right? The class approach is like the elite approach, except that the class approach emphasizes brainwashing, sure. It emphasizes propaganda. It emphasizes hidden power behind the scenes. But the class approach, like Karl Marx and communism, emphasizes also this. If you resist what we are doing, we will punish you. We will call the police on you. We will have the police beat you up. Maybe even kill you. We will have big prisons and put you in prison and take your freedom away from you. We will use coercion, fear, terror. Is emphasized a little bit more in the class approach. This is Marxist approach, right? And somebody who says, I'm a Marxist, they do not deny that interest groups play a role. But they emphasize, more importantly, if they're a Marxist, the role of power and the role of coercion and the role of also brainwashing, but more coercion. Like, for example, fear. Fear! If I join a trade union, I'll lose my job. My employer will find out that I have joined the union of workers in a labor union, and I lose my job. And I won't have any money to pay for my children's food and save for my children's education to go to college. Coercion means not just, bust your head over. Coercion means I will make your life miserable. Coercion in a more sophisticated way. Or combined with brainwashing. Vote for me, Donald Trump, because you vote for me, proud in a way. Because I represent traditional American values. And if you vote for me, you feel good. You're not like her, African American person. Ooh, African Americans. So combinations of these different perspectives are the three dominant perspectives on how governments make policy. And people who adhere to the elite approach or favor the elite approach and class approach, they hate the group approach. They hate me teaching you about the group approach. Because I'm part of the propaganda machine. I'm part of the brainwashing. They tell me, oh, yes, veggie burgers. Yay! Environmentalists beat the farming lobby. See, the interest group works. The interest group approach is the right approach. Who do you say? What do they say? Your spouse. The class and the elite approach. And they say, oh, it's ridiculous. That's a minor issue that you use to make people feel good.
It doesn't mean it means almost nothing. Why are you even talking about this, Professor Ben? Veggie burgers. It's ridiculously insignificant. It's just meant to further brainwash you. Oh, yeah, see, the group approaches the work. It works, see, democracy. So, who are some of the analysts in this approach? Some of this work is significant, is sophisticated. C. Wright Mills, right? He died a long time ago, and people still assign his reading. The Power Elite. The Power Elite was one of his books in the 1950s, highlighting how, in all levels of American society, from the local city level all the way up to the top, there's this traditional ruling group of people who are traditionally as families in power or dominant at their local level, and then there's a traditional level of ruling elite, typically families at the next level, and the next level, all the way up to the top. Dynasties. And you can identify them in the power elite in any city, right? And they form ruling, it's like ruling feudal dynasties where you have a local Yangban and a higher level Yangban and the Yangban at the top of the system. And they might be, we don't have official Yangban in the US, aristocrats, like we have historically in Europe or in Chosun, Korea. But we have de facto Yangban, like, Joe Biden. Joe Biden will become president. His son was making big money in Ukraine. And he said, I didn't have anything to do with my father. My father was not working with me to make money. Of course, yeah, officially no. But you really think Hunter Biden didn't get that job, making $50,000 a month from Burisma Ukrainian gas company? Because his father, even though his father was vice president of the United States, of course that's why he got that job. Because they know his father was vice president of the United States under Barack Obama. What are we stupid? Well, not just Biden, Donald Trump. He's setting up his children to become the next politicians. Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, they're already being talked about. Even if Trump loses this election, the Trump boys will take over. The Kennedy family. You know John F. Kennedy. Oh, the Kennedys! Oh, yes! Anybody with an established name as part of this the ruling elite that he described. And that's at the top level. At the local level, I can tell you the same stories. You know, in my hometown, Ohio. I'm from Canton, Ohio. The Timken family. The Timken family is the dominant Republican Party power center in Stark County, and they own Timken Company. Timken Corporation makes ball bearings and specialty steel. And Jane Timken is the, Jane, a woman, Jane Timken is the leader of the Ohio Republican Party, and Donald Trump put her there. And it's always been the Timken family, you know, in Stark County, Ohio. Or the Dickey family in Mercer County, in Ohio. Or the Taft family at the state level. The Secretary of State of the United States under Teddy Roosevelt, when he was president, and agreed that Japan can dominate Korea, if Japan allows the U.S. keep Philippines, was Taft, one of the Taft members, one of the Taft family. TAFP, Taft. We talked about this in another early in the semester. We talked about normative habitual control. Normative habitual control exists in society. Remember, normative active, normative habitual, utilitarian, and coercive control, right? Normative habitual control is strong in society. You can know if it's strong in society if politicians have tremendous influence because they have the right historic name, like the Kennedys. Even the U.S., which is anti-Yangban, U.S. is pro-achievement status oriented, right? It was founded by people that reject the Yangban. You have to show me what you can do. But even in America, the inheritance of the scribe status has emerged. Or even in Korea, you elected Park Geun-hye to be president. Why? Because her father was Park Geun-hye. And you know where it's strongest? Normative individual control in Japan. I read this a year ago. 60 to 70% of the parliamentarians in the Japanese parliament inherit that seat from their father. 60 to 70% are sons of previous parliamentarians. But that's another topic, right? All right. And you go on here. And it's even important, this is very important in Europe. This Yanban tradition is still very important in Europe. I mean, if you have that German prefix "fan" before your last name, that means you're Yanban. That counts for a lot. Van Roopau, Herman van Roopau. Right? Ursula von der Leyen. Ursula von der Leyen. Fine, she comes from a Yanban aristocrat family. This notion that, you know, I'm a baker, you're a miller, you're a butcher, you're a smith, and you're a Yanban. Why? Because your father was. And my father was a butcher, so I'm a butcher. Your father was a miller, so you're a miller. That's the way the world should be in traditional societies that ascribe status on the basis of your birth. That means family, 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 family. Who was your dad? Who was your abuji? That determines who you should be in traditional societies, or in other words, societies with normative habitual control is dominant. People obey because they think they should. Karl Marx is the class approach. The group approach is also called pluralist approach. Pluralism is a term you'll find all the time in describing the group approach. It's also called polyarchy. In other words, not ruled by democracy. Archy means rule, right? Power. Ruled by groups. You live in a society that you are ruled by groups. And, okay. So a public policy is any decision or action by government authority that results in the allocation of a value. And that value can be money. It often is money. Money, 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 money. But it can also be status, prestige, pride. That's a value. It can also be a negative value. I'm punishing. I'm fining you for your crime. I'm taking money from you. That's a negative value I'm allocating you. I'm fining you. Or I'm taking away your freedom, putting you in prison. That's a negative value that I'm allocating to you because you get a bad day. Who says? I say. The government. And it can also be prestige and pride. Oh, you are a tremendous servant to the state. We'll give you an award. We'll give you a diploma. We'll give you an official title, like Herman van Roopau. Since the Belgian students aren't here today, was officially made a Count of Belgium. So it's Herman Count van Roopau by the Belgian king. Way to go, Herman! Woo! Count van Roopau. That's allocating a value. Values include not only material values, but very much material values, but also symbolic values, as well as coercive values. What? So, you know, public policies include distributive policies, redistributive policies. We want to keep peace, so we can't have too much income differentiation between the rich and the poor. So I'm going to take some of your money and give it to her, so that she'll stop rioting or protesting. Okay? I'll give her some money, and I'll give her a fist. A combination of the two. Here's a little money. You're happy with that, aren't you? Always a combination. Regulatory policies, what the European Union emphasizes. Regulation.
regulations. Why do they favor regulations? Because they're not so controversial. When I pass a regulation that says that we are going to require that you cannot call soy drinks soy milk. Oh, okay, I call it soy drink. I don't care, you don't care. Most Europeans don't care. But dairy farmers who make milk, who raise cows in Europe, they care. So regulatory policies are easier to adopt because they're more complicated, they're more unusual, they're more technical. This is what the European Union has really emphasized in creating a single market, coming up with common regulations for what is soy milk, what is a veggie burger. Extractive policies, yeah, that's part of redistributive policies, right? Taxing you, taking money from you, and symbolic policies. I already talked about symbolic policies. Okay, so yeah, some powerful elite theorists besides C. Wright Mills, European theorists. Roberto Michel, very influential here. C. Wright Mills, I already mentioned it, from 1956, is a well-known American application of the elite approach to understanding. Remember, these people, to understanding how things are done in America, but these people are often very angry because they think we're all brainwashed. Don't you understand that you're being controlled and manipulated? Don't you understand? I'm trying to make you understand. Wake up, people. Wake up, you sheep. Wake up, you sheep people, you sheeple. That's the term they're using a lot of QAnon. Sheep people. You don't understand what I understand. There's a conspiracy by these ruling powerful elites to brainwash and control you. But of course, I see right now, understand. You shall be like me. Yeah, they're kind of arrogant. They're difficult people to deal with because they think, I know, and you're a fool if you don't. So let me enlighten you. And if you refuse to be enlightened, you're a pathetic figure. So these people are obnoxious, typically. Like, I'm wise and you're an idiot. Roberto Michel gave us the iron law of oligarchy, which means that, okay, you form the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA, P-E-T-A, and you hire a powerful lobbyist to lead that organization. And you know what happens? The president or director of that organization will take over the organization and make it do what he wants rather than what the people want. And they will convince you that what they want is what you want as members of PETA, as money payers, individual members of PETA. And they will get more and more power and more money, because they often want more money too, more payment, more higher salary. And they will end up dominating the organization. That's the iron law of oligarchy that Roberto Michel emphasized. And a couple of my favorite Italians, Wilfredo Pareto and Gaetano Mosca, they're more economists. They've done important work in economics. If you study economics, you'll study Pareto optimal outcome. But I mean, these people writing when Italy was unified in one state, right? Why do you want to unify the Italians of the Italian peninsula into one Republic of Italy? Because we want to end exploitation and poverty and tremendous difference in well-being between the richest Yamban and the poorest peasants. And we will achieve the uplifting of all Italians by unifying Italians in one liberal democratic republic where everybody has a vote, and we will elect politicians and the government officials to make policies and no longer rely upon kings and dukes and popes and princes and
and 10 years pass, 20 years pass, 30 years pass, 40 years pass, 50 years pass, 60 years pass, and guess what? The rich and powerful people are the same people. The same granddaughters, grandsons, great-grandsons, the same young ones that were in power in 1870 are still in power among their families in 1930. Oh, we don't have a king, or maybe we do. But in other words, many things haven't changed. Much. Well, not as much as we want. The Italians are still terribly poor. They're still sending their sons and daughters to America and Australia and Canada to find jobs because there are no jobs in Italy, because they're too poor. What is going on? These are the elite theorists. Even under communism, right? The rich and prosperous under communism emerged, and now, 30 years after communism ended, those people are still in top of the business class and the political class and the journalist class in Bulgaria, Romania, Poland today. They always find a way to be on top. Maybe they find a way because they're superior to beings. Maybe their genes, their DNA is better. Maybe it's that. Maybe it's a combination of the fact that if you're rich and prosperous, your children will be rich and prosperous. Hunter Biden, right? The drug and alcohol problem. Yeah, if my daddy's rich and powerful, and I have a drug and alcohol problem, I'll be okay. But if your daddy or your mommy cleans the bathrooms here, and you got an alcohol problem or drug problem, you're in big trouble because mom and dad can't take care of you. Like Joe Biden can take care of Hunter Biden used to have to be an alcoholic and a drug addict. And as I mentioned, the class approach emphasizes also propaganda, but also emphasizes the role of power and coercion and fear a little more strongly than does the elite approach. Class conflict is emphasized. That there is an intense conflict between workers and capitalists. And to control the workers, you got to brainwash them, but you also need to use this in very sophisticated forms, like I already described, right? Cause me in trouble, you'll be fired. This is pandemic time now. You're not going to find a job. No job, no money. No money, nothing for your kids. Stop talking about your rights. Your human rights. Your social and economic justice rights that the United Nations recognize. I don't want to hear about your right to vacation, even though that's in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. You have the right to leisure, you have the right to vacation. I don't want to hear it. Just feel lucky you got a job. So, just to conclude, make sure that I conclude to someplace where it makes sense, right? The elite approach emphasizes, yeah, of course, they're not silly. They know Moon Jae-in is there and Joe Biden and Barack Obama, but they hide behind the government. And the government is a buffer between the elite and the public. And you see, your attention is distracted, and your focus is on the government, what Moon Jae-in thinks and does. What the Korean Assembly is doing, what the German government is doing. But then there's this power elite that hides behind the government. And in the class approach, there isn't this emphasis on a buffer between the elite and the public. The elite and the government all are all together in the class approach, and it uses force, punching down. This emphasizes more the role of brainwashing. And the most recent, I shouldn't use that word brainwashing, but that's a term that emerged during the Korean War in the United States. That American soldiers would be captured by the North Koreans and the Chinese, and they would go to China and they would come back and say, "I support the revolution," and that's where this term brainwashing first emerged in the U.S. But it emphasizes propaganda and socializing you, and the most recent, most useful, non-interest group approach to understanding public policy is produced by a man named Antonio Gramsci. And he was an Italian Marxist, communist, whom Mussolini put in jail. And Antonio Gramsci wrote the prison notebooks while he was in prison. And he wanted to understand why this working class didn't rise up and overthrow this ruling group. Because Karl Marx predicted these people become poorer and poorer and poorer, and suffer more and more and more, and need more coercion and terror to control them. And eventually, this group would become so big and so horribly miserable that they would rise up and destroy the ruling class and establish world socialism. And it never happened. Still has never happened. And you want to understand why, Antonio Gramsci. And he emphasized the role of this ruling class in not using the term brainwashing, socializing these people to accept the status quo, what exists as okay, even if they are being oppressed, even if they are being abused, they accept it. How are you taught? How are you socialized to accept your inferiority? And so that's been the most important effort to combine the elite approach and the class approach. And so you read a lot. If you type this guy's name into, he died in prison, Mussolini's prison, and he's considered to be like the founder of Euro-communism, of creating Italian communist parties and European communist parties that are committed to peaceful change. Because you have to build a society. You have to build education institutions. You have to build neighborhoods. You have to build communities. You can't just expect people become so miserable and so oppressed that they will rise up and overthrow the government. That won't ever happen. You have to teach people from the time they're born. And you have to create institutions in the workplace, at the home, in the school, that socializes them into a new way of thinking and living. Okay. Climate change. See, where do I want to go here? We have to have a class debate. And so, European Union and climate change, is that going to change the world? Is that going to make the world a better place as we try to get rid of greenhouse gas emissions? And here you see the European Union, of course, claims it is a new kind of power, a civilian superpower, a kind of world actor that wants to uplift everyone, and is the biggest source of humanitarian aid for the world, that's most concerned about human rights, that wants to, because of course the poor people in the world suffer the most from climate change. They're the ones who are the most vulnerable to the disasters of big storms and rising sea levels from climate change, right? Because they live already most vulnerable economic conditions. So the European Union is claiming to be an actor that's working for the well-being of the world. And the European Union is, let's see, I'm going to highlight this. Which one do I want to highlight? There's three of them I wanted to open up here. And let's see if I can find. Okay, more about European Union policymaking. So this is from just a couple days ago. So you know, the United States, under Donald Trump, when Donald Trump was elected 4 years ago, he said the first thing he would do is take the U.S. out of the Paris Accord, Climate Accord of 2015, that is promising South Korea and Japan and China, they all promise to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And Donald Trump said if he is elected, the first thing he will do is take the U.S. out of the 2015 climate accords that Obama and Biden negotiated for the U.S. to join. Biden says if he wins the election, the first thing he will do on January 20, when he becomes president, is bring the U.S. back into the climate accords. But Donald Trump announced he was taking the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accords, and that came into effect on November. It came into effect this as of Wednesday. The U.S. left the Paris Accords a week ago. No, a week ago? No, 2 days ago. 2 days ago. And that was the earliest that the U.S. could officially leave the Paris Accords. And it says here, the accord essentially ties together every nation's voluntary emissions pledge in a single form, with the understanding that countries will set even tougher targets over time. The United States, under President Barack Obama, promised to reduce its emissions about 28% below 2005 levels by 5 years from now, 2025. But progress on that goal stopped under the Trump administration. And it goes on here. In recent weeks, there have been a spate of ambitious climate commitments from Europe and Asia. The European Parliament voted last month to cut emissions 60% by 2030. So they're increasing, accelerating, going even beyond the climate accords to reduce their emissions by 2030, with the goal of reaching carbon neutrality by 2050, that the European Union will emit zero in sum total carbon into the atmosphere 30 years from now, by 2050. That measure will now be considered by the European Union's Council of Ministers. So, here is an example of the European Union is changing its policy to go even more strong in favor of ending climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The European Parliament has approved it, but now the European Council of Ministers has to approve it to increase even further what they already promised to do. So China vowed to become carbon neutral by 2060. The pledge was followed by ones from South Korea and Japan, both of which vowed to zero out net emissions by 2050. So South Korea is going to have zero carbon emissions in 30 years. In zero net output of carbon in 30 years from now. Yeah, Korea is a leader in this, a world leader in this. So, should the Council of the European Union vote to approve reducing emissions 60% by 2030 with the goal of reaching carbon neutrality by 2050? This is going to cost big money. Big money. And we're trying to recover from the economic pandemic. Now we're going to spend more money on climate change reduction, on climate change. We're trying to survive the pandemic. So, let me see if I can do the poll here. Okay, should the Council of the European Union, that's the Council of Ministers, vote to approve reducing emissions 60% by 2030 with the goal of reaching carbon neutrality by 2050? So that's going to cost big money to you and me.
to do this. So, vote! "45 seconds. Can you hear me?" The other. Microphone. 3 more people need to vote. Two more. 20 seconds. 15. You know, South Korea already has the most expensive gasoline in the whole world here. Taxes. So there you see the results. Most of you say, yeah, but you know, you don't yet own your own cars. You don't own your own apartments. You don't have children and you're trying to save money so they can go to school and to college. If I tell you you're going to have to pay more taxes on gasoline that push you to buy an electric car, that's a lot of money. You saw in France the Yellow Vest movement. I don't know, how do you say Yellow Vest? Japan, whatever, I can't remember. The Yellow Vest movement, protest movement that began a few years ago because Emmanuel Macron put yet more taxes on gasoline to raise the price of gasoline so that French people would burn less gasoline and make less carbon emissions. And that caused these working people, the working poor, people who work and don't make a lot of money and they need a car living out in the countryside. They can't ride the train. They can't ride the bus because they live in the villages. They exploded in outrage. They said, Emmanuel Macron is trying to save the planet. He's trying to save to save the planet. We're trying to survive until the end of the month because of our salaries not being high enough. Now we have to pay more so that France can be green. So if this passes, it's going to pass by qualified majority vote in the European Council of Ministers, in the Council of Ministers. So I should have asked you, how are you going to pay for this? How will the EU pay the cost of this transition? Well, it already has to recover from the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression in 90 years. The worst economic crisis in 90 years. How are we going to pay for this? So let's break up into working groups. And remember who you are? Is this groups? This is groups, okay. And we're given the 4 groups. Okay, the person at the top is the chair. So Dong-Ru, Isai-Nung, and Jumel, and Choi Chun-yok are the chair of these 3 each of the groups. And once again, tell me how you're going to pay for this. Remember who you are, your perspective. How are you going to pay for this? To accelerate your greenhouse gas reduction so that in 5 years, you will cut emissions 60%, and in 30 years, you'll be carbon neutral. How are you going to pay for this? Remember, you're elected politicians. How can you pay for this when we have the pandemic crisis? You got to do this now as well? So those are your 4 groups, right? They're set up, right? You're ready to go? communicate with each other, this person will speak with a group. Where's Kim Bin Chul? Are you here? What about Melis Dugan? Okay, what about, okay. Isang Moon? Okay, so you're in charge of group 2. You're the chair. Who's WU? Oh. So you're in charge of group 1. Do you have an assignment? Did I give you an assignment to somebody? This list? Are you here? Huh? Oh no. Kangdong Kwan. Oh, you're here. Okay, you're Ursula on their land. One Kang here. So tell us how we're going to pay for this. Group 1, can you hear me?
Huh? Oh, good, good. See, this is cool. Yeah. How are you reducing greenhouse gas emissions? Yeah. Uh-huh. I mean, how are you going to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions when you've got to pay for all of this economic stimulus for the coronavirus pandemic economic catastrophe? You're going to do this as well? How are you going to do it? Jumel? Are you in charge, Jumel? Who's CUK 21? Because that's me. Just some idea. Why is it
reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Even go faster than the original plan.
So you're in California. So right now you're in Red Room 4, right? No, I was just asking, like, you're participating in our program.
Well, you're not talking to you. Talking to you. What you were talking.
Our group came up with an idea to tax the rich people because we thought that masses couldn't
Rich people.
the big companies because we thought that masses couldn't afford So,
we thought about so there's a quote from Spider-Man, is that with great power comes great responsibility. So well, the elite, the rich, they exploited the the little man for too long. Because now within their ability to take responsibility. Because at the end of the day, we all know different. So if you want to be sustainable, then they.
Okay. So that's rich people. Okay. And so, of course, the elite and Marxist theorists and class theorists are saying,
Good luck with that. Good luck with that. The Trump supporters say, no, we need to reduce human taxation and allow the magic of the marketplace, the free business market, of the free market to work its magic, etc., etc., etc. Elites and class would say Americans are the most brainwashed people in the whole world. Really, they would say that. Neoliberalism is the example of that. Group 2. Who is group 2? That's Isang Moon. What did you come up with?
My partner is Greece, and my own is Victor Orban, Hungary. So, in my opinion, I think if Hungary can get the support from the EU about the carbon neutrality, so we can accept it, but if that leads some EU, if the EU provide or need to control the condition of Hungary, so that situation we can reject it.
okay, how do I stop it? Group 3, Chanel. How do I do it? Okay. Chanel.
네, 지금 안 나요. 지금 안 나요. 네, 안 나요. 네.
Okay, yeah. Now, so Janelle says that is my fault. Janelle says what is my fault? It's in the chat. Okay, who's the next one? Hey, one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We talk about how we use it. The hard hanger, hardware, either camera and sensor and another company hardware topic. So we totally concentrate to 2021 and 2027. So this law, you very trade. So we allow carbon framework. So okay, group 4.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. My partner, who's the Prime Minister of Spanish, she said that because Spain was one of the countries that had a mass effect of the coronavirus, because Spain would be unable to support economically through give economic support on climate and greenhouse gas problems. But if we think about the European Union, it is one of the countries, of the main countries that went through industrialization in the past. And those countries such as America, China, and countries that emit a lot of greenhouse gases and affect the climate, I think those countries should proceed into supporting the world environment problems.
Well, that's what they are doing. This is a report that was in the New York Times a few days ago, and it illustrates an important point, right? Never miss the opportunity to exploit a crisis. It is the pandemic crisis itself that is allowing the European Union to act more strongly and so
근데 마이크 켜져 있어요.
지금 quite difficult to compare that Korea. Korea is such a small nation, and it's really easy to implement democracy. I mean, just directly. The problem with the EU and for example, England, the interest in the EU is not that big in normal citizens. So and plus, citizens don't feel like those are represented in EU Parliament either. So bureaucracies.
It looks like the elite is able to do what they want to do because you really can't see understand how things are done. The constructivist focus on the elite seems to be true. I mean, there's always some way they can do what they decide they want to do. Because it is so complicated. Group 2, Kim and Jewel. Anyone? What about ladies? Ladies, are you there? Kim and Jewel. Who's Kim and Jewel? There. Or Lee Hyun-gi. Yes, I want you to decide.
So you said first EU size of civil society is pretty small. So the Korean civil society is small compared to EU society. So it's relatively easier to control and join the citizens in participating in democratic politicians.
Okay.
Also, the termination of diplomacy can be summarized in three key stages of agenda setting, negotiation, and final decision. So in practice, however, there are differences based on the treaty of the legislative process. In accordance with each legislation subject, it is also involves a number of ways to determine the detailed procedures until the adaptation of each institution fails to reach a consensus.
Okay, complicated. Group 3, short crow. So, who's online? Who saw me? So me? What about Kwan? Kwan?
Yeah, we compare Korean system and Korean experience where president power is very high, so the president power has compared European Union, so and the intention are strong. First making so the policy making process tends to be political guidance, so and we think Korean political guidance is not participating process is low, so we talk about European EU participating, so those system.
Okay, and Twain.
Yes, so the European Union and the member states have the same goal, regardless of the size of the member state. And when it comes to policy making, they use a unanimous agreement system. And because the prime minister or the member that represents the member state is elected from the member state citizens, I think it is thought to be more democratic than South Korea.
Oh, yeah. So it's more clear when they decide by consent, by unanimous consent at least, that is more transparent, because you can understand that. But when you talk about democratic political systems within a country, not to mention the European Union as an entire political system, it's so complex. How are you as a citizen of the European Union supposed to understand how to participate and actually believe that you're having your voice heard? When it looks all like it's just a way to control you, the elite, from the elite point of view, to get you to agree to whatever they want to agree to. I mean, they're not even going to hide anymore, giving the European Union all these powers to go to borrow hundreds of billions of euros to go into debt. We're not asking anybody's. Well, I think the European Parliament has to approve, and the Council of Ministers does have to approve. So that's not completely true. Okay, well, we're going to have to stop there. And before we do, let me a couple more polls here. And yeah. I don't know the other polls. Right. Oh, here, yeah. Who won the debates? Please vote.